Hey everyone, welcome back to the Angular mini project series, where we take real world ideas and turn them into smart reactive apps using NgRx and RxJS. We have built some cool apps with NgRx, but now we are adding a critical piece, which is user authentication and user specific data. So get ready because today we are building a full featured to-do list application where users can sign up, log in, and manage their own private list of tasks. Okay, so I will give a quick demo of our application. So first I will register as a user and then I have to log in. And then here we will create some tasks as you can see, and we can edit those tasks and delete those tasks. And then we can log out, and now I will register as a different user. As you can see, now when we log in, I will create some other tasks which are unique to these users. Okay, now if I log out, now if I log in as the previous user, you will see that I have got my private list of tasks, and if I refresh the page now, the task still exists. And if I log out and if I log in again as the previous user, you can see that I have got my task there as well. Okay, so as you can see, when I'm logged in and I try to access my to-do, I can do that. But if I log out and then if I try to access my to-do URL, then you will see that it redirects me back to my register login because of our auth card feature. So we will be using Angular standalone APIs, JSON server for our mock backend, which will be handling our users and their to-dos, and of course NgRx to manage all of our application state. This includes the authentication status, so basically who's logged in, their token, and their to-do items. We will dive deep into NgRx Effects for handling our API calls for registration, login, and to do all of our to-do operations. Plus, we will secure our to-do list page using Angular route guards that reads from our NGRX store. So this again is a really important topic. So this project ties together so many essential concepts for building real, secure web application. So let's jump in and build this application together. So first, let's open our terminal, and inside this, we will create our Angular project. For that, we will be using ng-new command. We'll be calling our app Angular ngrx to do auth, and as this will be a standalone project, and this time we want our routing, so we'll mention it like this, and styling will keep as CSS. Once you press enter, then it will ask for if we want server-side rendering. We would say no for now, and it will start creating our Angular project. Now it will install all the packages we need. Then we will take this project and open it into our VS Code. Great, so our project has been installed successfully. Now inside my VS Code, so here I will just drag and drop this folder. So you can see there's the folder here, Angular ngrx to do auth. So I'll just drag and drop it here, and I'll close my terminal. And that's it, we have got our project inside our VS Code. And now I will open the terminal, and inside the terminal we will check if our project is been serving correctly. So we'll do ng-serve, and if we go to localhost 4200, then we can see that our application is up and running. So now we can start building our project. So which means we will install all the NgRx related libraries and also define our JSON server, which will be basically our mock backend. So we will go inside this node, and here we will run our ng-add command to install our store, our effects, our DevTools, and our router store too. So here I'll just copy paste all the commands. So you can see I've got ng-add, ngrx-store, latest. This will install the latest store version, and then for effects, for DevTools, for router store, and we'll use npm install to install our local storage. We will need this as it doesn't lose all the values we need whenever our page is refreshing. So we will also install this local storage. Once we press enter, it will ask for some permission. We'll say yes here, and it will keep installing all the packages as we need. Great. So all of the packages we need store related have been installed successfully. Now we will go to the most important thing, which is to install our JSON server. So right here itself, we will use the command. We'll say npm install, and we want to install our JSON server. So JSON server like this, and it will install the server in our application. Once we have done this, then we can create our db.json file, which this server will basically read up to, right? So inside our project root, we need to create a db.json file, basically which will act as our backend. So here I'll create a file and I will call it db.json. Okay, so inside this now we will have two main collections. So one will be our users. So we will be storing our users data as we will be authenticating the user, registering them, and for login purposes. So we need users detail, right? Another thing is the users to-dos. So each user will have their own specific data. So now what we will do is we will have a ID which will connect this user to this to-do, and we will store it inside their own array object. So these two collections we need to maintain. Okay, so just to show you guys as an example, I have got some predefined data here. So for example, it will have a users array here where it will have an object, and you can see this is one user. It has its password, its email, a name, and a ID. And the to-do list, whatever we have, we'll have a lot of to-do lists, right? And to identify which user is connected to which to-do, you can see here the to-do list has its own unique ID, which is fine. But then you see it has a user ID, which is equals to this ID. So that is how they are connected. And then it has all the details like task, if it's completed or not, when it was created, and we can have all of the other stuff. But one thing which you have to keep in mind is that just to keep this tutorial easy, we are storing our password here. But in a real app, you would never do that. And you will have a lot of methods to store it securely. So now let's start our JSON server. So here I will run the command, which is JSON server, and I want to watch my DB file. So I'll say JSON server, and I want to watch my db.json. So I'll say db.json. Now it will watch this file, and you can see it has got two endpoints, one for our users and one for our to-do. So now we can do all kind of get, post, and whatnot, all the other requests we want to do to these endpoints. So there we have our full backend setup ready. We have got our setup for the front end ready too. Now we can get started with our coding. Great. So what we will do is we will first define all of our store related stuff. Then at the end we will define our UI, connect them all together, and we should have our application. So for that you can see everything starts with the user. So we have a user, the user logs in, and for that he uses different store actions, reducers, and effects. So we will start with our auth model. So we need to have a model for our user. So inside our SRC, inside the app folder, we will create a auth folder. This auth folder will have our auth state, our actions, our reducers, and our selector. So basically everything related to a user authentication. Okay, so this is really important, so stay focused. So I'll create a folder and I will call it auth. Now inside this auth folder, we will have all the related stuff we need related to our user authentication. So first file I will create is our auth model. So auth.model.ts. So inside the auth model here, basically we need different interface. For example, for a user. So how will we define our user? Like it should have ID, name, email, right? And then a response. So whenever in a real life, whenever a user fills his information and registers or login, at that time it sends a response to the backend. So then the backend via the API, it returns user its returned object with some changes, and also it gives a token like how long the user is going to be logged in, right? So we need to define all of these interfaces. So here I will say export interface, and I will define the user. So user model, and it will have an ID. So this will be of type string, a name, and this will be of type string too. And at the end we will have an email. So email would be of type string as well. So that's it. That's our user model here. And we won't be giving our password here because we do not want our password to be stored in the front end. So we want in our user object, we won't be having password. Okay. Now we need to have an auth response. So whenever our mock API, whenever we fill these details and we send it to our server, so the API will return a user object. Okay. So for that we need an auth response. So here we will define our that interface. So we'll say export interface, and this will be our auth response. Okay. And the auth response here, we will have our user, and this will be of type this user. Okay. And we will have our token. So we'll say access token. This property we are defining right now, which will be of type string. So we're just defining a token, right? Okay. And then after this we will have here our auth state, so actual state. Okay. So this would be export interface our auth state, and inside this we will have first of all our user, which will be of type this user model, and it can be null too, like this. Okay. And then we will have a token would be of type string. Okay, or null, like this. So we're just putting validation, and we will have more properties like is our user logged in or not. So is logged in, so that we can show them the other pages, right? So if our user is logged in, so that would be a true false value, so we'll have a boolean. Okay, and then we will have one more property which will be is our spinner loading or all the other stuff, so we'll say is loading, like are we still getting the data, so then it would be of type boolean is loading, and a error property obviously that will be of type string. That's it. That's it. So we have successfully defined our auth model. Now we can actually go and define our action file. So auth.action.ts, where we will have all the actions you can think of, and it will all make sense once we start writing our actions. So here we will have our new file and we'll call it auth.actions.ts. Okay, so when it comes to defining our actions and you don't know what actions to create, then you could think of all the real cases our application would need. For example, registering a user, logging a user, and what comes with it? Our success. So whenever we register a user, we get a success response from our API or we get a failure response. Same happens with our login too. We get a login success from our API, or there is a problem in our API and we get a failure response. So we need to define all of these actions. And don't forget, whenever we log out in our app, that is also an action. So we need to define our logout action too. So that's it. We just need to define all of these actions. So we'll start with our register user action. So we will say export constant and we will call it register user. So this will be coming from our create action, which comes from ngrx store. And inside this, first we will have our action message. So inside the bracket, first we will write what is it for. So it's for our auth page, okay? And what it does, it registers our user. So that's it. So that is how we write our action message. And after this, now we will add our payload which goes with our actions. So we'll use props to do that. And here we will have our credentials. So whenever we want to register a user, we want to send some credentials like the name of the user, the email, and the password, right? So we will take this from the front end where we will dispatch this action and it will register the user and give us a response. So here we will have our credentials. This will be an object and it will have properties like our name, email, and password. And we just need to put our brackets here. That's it. So we have successfully defined our first action, which is our register user. So every time we want to register our user, we send this payload from our TS file. So basically from our form or anywhere, which is our name, email, and password. So basically we'll be sending these details to our localhost 3000/users and we will be doing a post request. So when we get a response from it, we will get a success response. Again, then we will take that response and show it on the front end. So now we will register our success action, okay? So we'll say export constant register success. Okay, again same bit, create action. We'll have our action message here and our payload. So this time we'll have this as its success, so we'll say register success here as our action method, and we will be dealing with our API. So we'll say here auth API, okay? And this you can write whatever you want. It is just easy for me to know what my action does. And after this, we will have our payload. So whenever we send this action, our API is basically giving us a user response. So we'll say props, and this will have an object which will be our user. That's it. So our user, we will import user model. That's it. So this is our success action where we have our props, which is user. That's it. Okay. Now we will have our failure action too. And failure action would be just like this. So we will have here register failure, and here we'll have props basically of type error. If our API fails, then we get an error object instead of a user object. So that's it. Pretty easy. So this is for our register. Now we need to do same thing for our login too. So for our login user, our login success, and login failure. So here I will have export constant login user. Again, this will be create action, and we need to pass our props. So in the props this time, again we will have our credentials, like how we have here credentials like this. And this time, as we are logging the user and not registering it, so we just need the email and the password. That's it, like this. So we'll have email of type string and password of type string, and that's it. So we have got our login user action here. Now like this, I will have my login success too. So I'll say export constant. This would be login success. So this time we will have a props, again same bit. So props, this time it will be object and it will be our auth response because we are logging in the user, so we're getting a response. So we'll have a auth response object here, and you remember we already created this. So I'll say auth response, and this will be of type this auth response, which comes from our model. So if you see this here, I'll show you what this object looks like again. So if we hover over it, you can see it has user and it also has the token. So as we are logging in, we want to give user some time or give them the token that yes, they are allowed to log in. So this is the token for that. So we're just returning this auth response. We just have one extra property, which is access token. That's it. Okay. Now we will have our login failure, which will be same as our register failure. So we'll have auth API, login failure, props, error of type any. Okay. After this, we have our last use case, which is our logout user. So we'll say logout user, logout user. That's it. Okay, so now we are done with our actions. So let's create our auth reducer file now. So again, inside this folder, we will create a file. We'll call it auth.reducer.ts. So first thing which we will do is we will define our auth feature key. Okay, so it's just a string called auth. And now we can define our initial state for our auth, like how we do it every time. So here we will have our export constant and we will have our initial state. So initial state would be of type auth state, which we define in our model, right? This one. So we're just gonna initialize this state, okay? We will open our object here and inside this we will have all the properties. So user would be null in beginning like this, and we'll have our token, which will be as well null. And we will have other properties like is loading, is logged in. So is logged in would be false in the beginning as the user is not logged in, and same is loading to this would be false because we haven't started the loading yet. Error would be null. So that's it. We've initialized our initial state. Now we can start defining our reducer. So we'll say export constant and it's a auth reducer. So we'll call it auth reducer. Okay. And it will come from create reducer. This stuff is pretty same. If you've done NgRx, we'll initialize our state. And then we will have our on functions for our register and our logins. Okay. So first inside this, we need to import our action. So we need to trigger these on functions and update the state on particular actions. So we need to import all of our actions here. So we'll say import asterisk s and we'll call it auth actions. Okay. And they'll just come from our action file. So like this. So now on particular action, we will update particular state of our reducer. So we'll say auth actions dot. The first one we'll handle is our register user. So we'll say when register user action is called, at that time we will take the state, we'll open our arrow bracket and here inside, and we will also import our on here. So we'll go here, update import, and now inside we'll take our state like this, and we'll have our properties such as is loading. So whatever property we want to change on this specific action. So we are loading at this point. So we'll say is loading as true and our error would be null. Okay, that's it. We won't do anything with our other properties for now. Okay, so and then we'll have other action. So after this one we'll have a comma. So we are finished with this on function. Now like this we will have for our on register success, failure, login user, login failure, login success. Okay, now for our register success and failure, I'll just copy these bits as it would be same almost. So here we'll have on register success. So this will be register success, and here with the state we'll also have our user. So like this. And for is loading, as we are already done with our response, so we'll make it false at this point. We are done with our loading. Error would be null again. Okay, that's it for register success. Now for register failure. So here we'll have our register failure, and this time again is loading would be false because we are done and we've got a failure. And our error here, we need to pass the error object as well here. So here we'll have like this, and we'll have our error object, and we will give this error property this error object. So we'll say error dot message here like this. Or if it cannot find the value, then we can just say like a string that registration failed. Okay, like this. So we are done with our whole of the registration actions, which include our registering of the user, success and failure. Now same we will have for our login as well. So for login, we will have something like this. Again, we'll just copy this from here, and this is the login action. So here we'll have our login user, and again at this time here, our is loading would be true because we are loading, error would be null, and we'll have same way for our success too. So here we'll copy this, we'll have on login success. So this one login success, and we will receive this time our auth response. If you remember this one. In the action you can see for login success we've got auth response, right? So here we will have our auth response here like this, and here what we will do when our login success has happened, this is where our user actually logs in and he can see the to-do list. So at this point we want to give here all the properties, so like our user property. So user would be our auth response, this value auth response dot user, so it will has the user which we get it from the API at this point. Okay, and our is loading would be false because we are done with our loading, right? Error would be null, and we'll have other properties like our is logged in. So is logged in would be true because we are logged in at this point, so true here. And we have other properties such as our token, so token will take and it will come again from our response, so auth response dot token, access token. Okay, like this. So we are done with whole of our login success too. Now like this we will have for our login failure too. So I'll copy this, paste it, and this would be login failure. So this time instead of auth response we will receive our error object right here like this. So user, this time user won't be able to log in because for some reason it failed. So here we will give user null so that we don't allow user to log in because for some reason they couldn't log in, maybe wrong credentials or something like that. And is loading would be again false here, and is logged in, this would be false because they're not logged in, right? That's it. And for our token here we will make this token as null because they couldn't log in, so it would be a null value. And for error we will pass same like this, error dot message if there is some message, or not our registration failed, this bit like this. Okay, so that's it. Now we are done with all of the major login and register reducer functions. Now we need to write our logout. So we'll say dot 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 and initial state, and that's pretty much it. We are done with all of our reducer logic at this point. So now comes the most important part, which is our auth selectors. So selectors allow us to select different part of our state, okay, and we can load them in our component. So we'll create our auth.selector.ts file. So inside the auth here, I'll create a new file and I'll call it auth.selectors.ts. So first thing we will do is we will select our auth state from our reducer. Okay, so for that we'll say here export constant, and we will call it select auth state. Okay, like this. So here we will use our create feature selector. So whenever we want to select the full state, that time we use create feature selector. So here it will be auth state, and inside this here we will put our auth feature key. You remember the feature key which we created is this one. So we are connecting these here. Okay, so we are selecting this feature key and state in our selector. So we will import our reducer. Okay, first of all, so here we'll say import asterisk as from auth, and this is basically our reducer. So we'll say dot slash auth reducer. Okay, and we also need to import our auth state. So we'll say import auth state, and it comes from our model. So this auth state. Okay, that's it. So here we will say inside this it will be auth state. Okay, so for our selector, and it is basically we are connecting it to our from auth dot feature key. So auth feature key, that's it. So we have connected our this feature key. Okay, now we have full state available to ourselves. Okay, now we can go and start select some specific part of the state we need according to our application. So what would we specifically need? Like selecting a specific user when we want to log in, right? So his state we need. So for that we will say export constant, and we'll say select user. So for a single user, so we'll say create selector. So now we want to select specific state, so that time we'll use create selector and not feature selector. Okay, so inside create selector we will take the full state, which is this select auth state, and then we can take a specific state. So we'll take state, open the arrow bracket, and we'll choose. So we'll say state dot user. So now we will get this user object. Okay, so this whole data of the user using this. So you see how easy it is. So like this we can get different parts of our state. So now I want to know my token, so I want to select the token. Okay, so for that I'll say export constant, and I'll say select token. So like this, whatever you need in your front end you can select it from here. So we'll say create selector, and same like we'll select our state. So we'll say select auth state, take the state, open arrow bracket, we'll say state dot, and we can take the token property. So like this you can take for all of these properties we have. Okay, token is logged in and whatnot. So I'll just copy other bits here. So here after token, I have select is logged in. So we want to know if the user is logged in or not, right? So we can show the other data. So for that we have selected state.isLoggedIn. Another selector we created is select auth loading. So if our data is this still loading or not, so then we can show a spinner or something like that. So we do select auth loading, and if there is an error, then we are selecting our error too. So that's it. We can have specific selectors like selecting a user ID. So if we want to select a user ID, we can even do that. I'll give you an example. So for example, export constant, and we'll do select user ID. Okay, we'll create our selector, open it, and now we want to select the ID, right, of the user. So we will use this select user where we already have the select user here. So we'll take select user and we'll take its data. So here we have user, open the arrow bracket, and we'll say user.id. So see, we can even select the email ID and other properties as well using these selectors. So how selectors help us to safely access our user ID. Okay, so you can use like this to get email as well if you want, and then you can use this selector to show that email or other property anywhere in your application. So these are the advantages we get with our selectors. So with that, we are actually done with our selectors. Now we will come to another important part, which is our service. So auth service. So this service will basically interact with our JSON server for our registration and our login. So it is really important. So we'll go in auth and we will create a new service here. So new file, and we will call it auth.service.ts. That's it. So we will define our service class here. So we'll say export class, and this will be auth service. Okay, so like this, auth service. Okay, and we will make sure that our service is available throughout our application. So we'll inject in our root. So we will do injectable here. Okay, and this injectable we will provide in whole root. So we'll say provide in, and this will be root. Okay, so now we have our service available throughout our application. So now we can actually start implementing our service. So two things we'll do. In our service, we are dealing with HTTP request, right? You can see here. So we need to inject HTTP client, and also we need to store this URL so that we can access it. So inside the class here, I will say private HTTP, and I'll inject the service. So I'll say inject, and I'll say HTTP client. So it comes from Angular common HTTP, and that's it. Now we have HTTP client available. Now we can actually do all the get, post, and the other request we can do. Okay, so the request we need to send and receive data to our backend JSON server, and we will say that private users URL. So whenever we want to do any changes to the users data, we are gonna do that using this URL, right? User URL. So we have this URL, and we'll just take it, copy paste from here. So this one, so we'll just copy it and paste it. So HTTP localhost 3000/users. Okay, so we have got this. Now we can go and define our methods. So we have two methods. One is to register the user, and the other is to log in the user. Okay, so we'll have register, and the other one we'll have is for login. So we will start first with our registering the user. Okay, so we will say register here. Okay, like this, and this method here inside this, what we will do, it will take a credentials. So when we want to register the user, as I mentioned before, it will take our name, our email, and our password. So we will have a credentials object here, and inside this we will take different properties. Okay, so it will take a name, as you know, and that will be of type string. It will take an email, again of type string. Okay, like this, and at the end we will take the password of the user to register, right? So that will be of type string too, and this whole basically method, this will be of type observable, because that is how we take observables into account when we use these services and effects in our component file. We take observables, right, and we pipe those observables and get the data out of them. So this observable will be of type user here. Okay, so user, we will import our user model. So basically ID, name, email, because when we will receive the user from our backend, that time we do not want the password. So here we'll get the password, but when returning the object again, we'll just return the ID, name, email. Okay, so like this. So we get observable of type user. Okay, now inside this we will start by creating our new user, as we are creating a user. So here we'll say constant new user. Okay, so this will be of type user. First of all, it will help us in our type definition, and after this here we will open our object and we'll start creating the user. So it will have an ID, and ID, we need to have a unique user ID for each of our user. So for that we can use UUID. Okay, and we need to install UUID using npm. So here I can say npm install uuid. Now this will install this library, and then we can just use this library to create our unique ID. So here now I'll import. So I'll say import v4 as uuid. So this uuid v4, we have basically this thing which we want to use, and it will come from our uuid like this. You see, that's it. Now we can take this and use it here. Okay, so we'll copy it, and here it will generate us a unique ID. So like this, you see, it will create a unique ID every time our user has been created. Now we can have the other two properties, such as our name, which we need. So name we'll get from these credentials, right? Basically this service. So here we'll have credentials dot name. Okay, and we will have our email too. So email we will have here credentials dot email. That's it. So these are all the things we need to generate our user. Okay, so after this, once we have created our new user, we will create constant user to save. So we want to save a user, right, in our DB, like in our backend, basically in this db.json file. So to our server, we will take the object. So we'll take this new user. Okay, and now to save it, we also need to give our password, right? So here we'll give the password property, and this will be our credentials dot password, whatever user writes. So like this. So we're not returning our password in the new user object, but when we want to save, we're creating this new object where we are taking the new user details and we are amending the password. Okay, because we'll need this password when we are logging in, so we can check something. So it needs to be in our DB. Okay, so next thing we need to do is, whenever we are registering the user, we need to check if our user already exists in the database. Then if it exists, then we shouldn't allow user to add the same user, otherwise there will be duplicate users. So for that, here we'll say return, and we'll say this dot http dot get. So whenever user is making the get request with the details filled in and trying to log in, that time we'll do the check. So we'll say return this dot http dot get. First we wanna get it, before doing the post request, where we actually submit the user. So we'll get all the users. So we'll say this dot http dot get. So here we'll say user array. Okay, like this. So from where can we get all of these users? So we can get all these users from our this users URL. All the users are stored here. So now here we will have open our brackets here, and we'll use our back brackets like this. And now we can use the dollar variable, and inside this we'll paste this dot users URL. So now we are going using get request. We are accessing the users URL where we have all the users. And how do we want to access it? So after this, we will use our query, and we will say email. So we want to get the email criteria. So for that we'll use email dollar, and then we'll say credentials dot email. Use the email property, and just for the type safety we'll convert it to lowercase. So we'll say dot to lowercase here. Now after this, what it will do is it will go and find the user which have the email already registered. So basically we are using our email to find if the user already exists or not. Okay, so now after this we can pipe. So here we'll pipe, and inside this we can use our switch map. So here we'll use switch map to loop over our existing users. Okay, so here we'll say existing users if their basically existing users exist. So here we'll open our arrow bracket, and we'll say whatever users we are getting basically at this point. If we get any users, we'll say here if their length. So if existing users dot length, if it's greater than 0, which means the user already exists with this email. So in that point we do not want to do a post request, like we do not want to take this data and put it in our DB. At that point we want the user to stop. So there we will return our service. We'll say return throw error. Okay, like this. Open our arrow bracket, and we will throw an error. So here we will say new error, and we will define our error, which is email already exists in DB. So basically email is already there. So we wouldn't allow user now to communicate with our backend at this point. But if this is not the case, like this one, once the switch map, we take the user detail. If existing user dot length, if it's not greater than 0, so after this what we will do? So here we want to go and make a put request with this data and put it in our DB right here. So for that, now we will do a put request here. So here we'll say this dot http dot post request, actually, right, post. So we'll say this dot http dot post, and this will be our user object. Okay, and what do we want to take? We want to take here this dot users URL. This is the URL which you want to communicate with. So what we want to submit here, we want to submit this users to save with our password. So here we are doing users to save. Okay, so now once we have done that and we do a post request with this data, okay, then we can pipe it here, and here we can say inside this we'll map and we'll take our data, which is our user. So here we will say return our new user. That's it. So what we did is, see, we submitted the data with our password, but when we receive it, we received it without our password. So here it will return the object without the password, and then we can use it in our front end. But if this is not the case, like if there is a global problem happening in our HTTP, it's not a problem from our side. If it's like a server problem or an internet problem, then at that point we want to catch those errors and tell user that there is a problem. So here after this we will have a catch error. So here we'll say catch error, and inside this we will declare a method here and we'll say this dot handle error. Okay, and now what we'll do is we'll create a method which will handle our error. So this will be of type observable too. So once we are done with that, our this method register user is actually done. So, and there is a problem here, typo, that's it. So you see all the errors would be gone as soon as we declare this method handle error. So here after this I'll create a method and I'll call it private handle error, as you can see. So this method, you can see that it takes our error whichever we receive. For example, here we receive an error here, right? So we'll take that error of type observable, and then we say that unknown error occurred during authentication, could be a 404 or any other. So if the message exists, then show the error. If there is a status like 404 or 501 or something like that, then we can take that status, show as message that there is this specific error. Okay, and then we can throw the error like this. So we are just showing it like this here. So you can see how easy it is. And why I have created this method is because I am going to use the same method here like this in our login too. Whenever we cannot log in, then we need to show a catch error there as well. So that is the reason I have created this whole private method here. So now let's create the login method. And in this method, we will take again our credentials, but this time we'll take email and password. That's it. That's all we need for logging our user. Okay. So we need an email. Email would be of type string, and then we'll have a password again of type string. Okay. So that's it. And the login, basically this will be of type observable. And you remember that whenever we log in the user, we get a token. So this would be of type auth response. If you remember, the auth response had the token plus our user object, right? So that's it. So we're gonna return it like this. And okay, so again we will make a HTTP GET request and check our email and password and return that user. Okay. So and here we need to put our user's URL. So like this, how we got the data, right? So same way we will again get it here as well. So like this. And now what we need to do is this time when we are making the query with our email, we are also checking the password. If both of them matches, then only we want to get that specific user, right? So here after when we have made the email, we'll do a and we will pass our password too. So here password like this, use the $, and we will say credentials dot password like this, and then we can pipe it, and inside this we can map our user, the user which it will return. Okay, so here we'll say map, and we will say here users. Okay, and obviously there should be one single user. Okay, so here we will open our arrow bracket, and inside this we will say if users dot length, if it's greater than 0, basically one user, and then we want to take that specific user. So we'll say constant users equals to users at 0, basically get that single user with this username and password. So now what we will do is, now you remember when we register the user, we are getting this comes with the password, but our user object which we want, it shouldn't have a password. It should only have its name, email, ID. So what we need to do is we need to exclude the password from our user object, like this user. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll take here constant and we'll remove the password. So like this. So you can do it like password and you return the other properties. So we'll call it user without password. So, and it's coming here user. Okay, so what we have done is we've taken this user data and we have manipulated it. We have removed the password from it and we are returning all the other properties. Okay, so after this we can return our new object. So here we'll say user, and this user will be of type this user without password. Okay, so like this user without password. Okay, now next thing we need is, remember this auth response, basically it's of type user we have done, and other is access token. So this access token property we need, and this will be, we need to create a mock token. Okay, so what we'll do is, so now what I've done is here I've just created a simple mock token. So we've got a mock token here, for ourselves, where basically it takes the specific user its ID and with date time it creates a token. That's it. So now we have a specific token for each user whenever they log in for the session. And after this if statement here, we'll have a else, and we will say throw. So basically if this doesn't exist, we cannot find the user, then we'll say throw new error, invalid email or password. That's it. So that is our error statement. And if none of these exists, like if there is again a HTTP error, then we need to do same as this here. So we'll just copy and paste. So after this, we'll just put our catch error. So you see how easy it is. So we have successfully completed both of our login and our register methods. Now come the part when they will actually get triggered and the stuff happens. It's in our auth effect, and the effect gets called from our action, and in turn action gets called from our UI, right? So we need to now create our auth.effect.ts file, the side effect where the whole logic will happen. So in our auth file, here I will create my new file and I'll call it auth.effects.ts. So we will start with defining our effects. So we'll say export class and it will be auth effects, okay, like this. And again, this will make as injectable true, like this. Okay, so now inside this, we will have 4 effects. So one of the effect would be our register user, okay. So this effect, then we'll have a register user success action, okay, and we'll have same for a login user and a login success, okay, like this. So before we start with our coding, we need to inject our action, our service, and our router. Okay, so now we'll start with our register user effect. So we'll say here register user, and each effect will be represented by the $sign like this. So register user effect, and this will be our create effect. Comes from NgRx effect. Open the arrow bracket, and inside this we will have our logic. So we'll say this dot actions, and we want to pipe. So we'll pipe here, and we'll open our pipe here. And inside this we will say that when do we want to trigger this effect, on which action type. So for that we'll use of type. And here we will say basically we want to dispatch it when our register user action is called, basically this action. Whenever this action register user it's dispatched, at that time we want to call this effect, okay. So for that we need to import our actions here, auth actions. So now here we'll say whenever basically from auth dot our register user this action is dispatched, at that time we want to call this effect and do some logic. So at this point here we will use our exhaust map here. Inside the exhaust map we will take our action, basically the data we are getting here. We'll open our arrow bracket, and here we will call our auth service. So we'll say this dot auth service. So inside the auth service we have our register logic. So dot register. Now this will communicate with our API using our credentials, the register credentials, give us our user back, okay. So here we'll say action dot credentials, okay. Now I'm getting this dot credentials because action I'm passing it, as you can see here, the credentials, right? So name, email, and password. So here when I give action dot credential, pass it to our register function using the service, you can see. So now this basically effects communicate with this service, and it return us our new user. So I hope this all makes sense to you. So when we pass our action dot credentials here, then we can pipe. So we'll use dot pipe, and inside this we'll have our logic. So here we'll map, and we'll map over the user. So at this point we have returned the user from our this service, right? So we are mapping over the user, and here we'll say, so we want to call our basically now register success action, right? So we'll say from auth dot register success, this one. And what it will do is, you remember the register success action, this one, it has our props, which is our user. It takes our user, right? So here we are getting the user as well from our auth service, if you remember. So here we can pass the user here, that's it. So basically we have given this user here, okay. Now our register success have this updated user we get from our backend. Great. So now after this we'll just put a validation, and we'll put a catch error here. If for some reason our effect fails, so here we'll have an error, and we'll say off. So we use off because we want to convert it to an observable type. So here we'll say from auth dot basically our register failure. So if our register fails, then we want to dispatch our register failure action, okay. So that's it. Now inside this register failure we need to pass our error object, like this. So you see how well structured is our register user effect here. and how easy it is. Now you can imagine all of the other effects we are gonna make, like our register success, our login user, and our login success would be in a same pattern like this. Okay, so what we'll do is inside the success, so we'll create a register success effect, okay? And here we will have our auth type again. So what kind of action do we want to trigger this effect on? So we want to trigger this whenever this action is called, okay? So here we will say auth type from auth dot our register success. Only at that time we want to trigger this register success effect, which makes sense. So after this we'll have our tab operator, okay? And we'll open our arrow bracket, and here we will basically show whatever we want to do after our user has been successfully registered. So what we want to do is, first I want to alert the user that you have been registered successfully and now you should go and log in. So for that I'll show alert, please log in. That's it. And now after this, one more thing which I can do actually to make our user experience easy is I can say this dot router, the router I injected here. So I can say this dot router dot navigate. So I can navigate my user to the login page because they should log in after they have registered, right? So I'll say this dot router dot navigate, and I'll pass the link here. So inside this I'll say /login. So that's it. So after we have successfully registered our user, it will call this and then it will redirect our user to the login page. And as this effect doesn't dispatch action, right? So we will make our dispatch as false. So after this I'll say dispatch as false like this. So that's it. We have done our register success effect as well. And for the login user effect, I will go and copy this register user effect, okay, so that it would be a bit faster. So I'm going to copy this and I'll start renaming all of it. And this will be basically from auth dot login user, okay, like this. So this effect will only get called when we are logging the user, okay. So we again use our exhaust map here, and this time this dot auth service dot register we use our login method, okay, and we pass the credentials whatever we receive from this specific action, which is our email and password, okay. Then what do we do is, here we do not receive this user. What we receive is our auth response, you remember, right? So auth response, and then we'll take this auth response and put it in this success, and this will be our login success. That's it. And this will be login failure. There you go. So you see how easy it is to write our login user effect, and same way we will also do for our register success as well. So we'll just copy this basically for our login success, okay, and this will call basically from auth dot login success, okay. And in this case I'll remove the alert because user is logged in and I'm going to show them their to-do list. So here first of all I'll redirect them to the to-do list, okay. So I'll say /to-dos, okay, like this. This will be our URL, you can see, right, to-dos. So we want to redirect them to this specific our to-do URL, okay. And then what I'll do, dispatch would be false, and that's pretty much it. We do not have to do anything else here. So that's it. We are done with our login success effect as well. Now comes our last effect, which is our logout user. We just need to use our router. So we'll say this dot router dot navigate, and we want to navigate it to the login again. So we'll say here dot and here /login like this. That's it. So, and also obviously we need to dispatch login as false as well because we're not dispatching any action here. So we'll say dispatch false. That's it. So you see we have actually completed all of our effects here. And do not worry, for this logout user, whenever we are logging the user out, our reducer will take care of clearing the state, and our ngrx local storage will also clear, as it's also part of our state, which I'll show you guys later on. Okay, so now we are done with our auth effects. Now we need to create our auth guard file. So in order to prevent the user which are not logged in and we don't want them to access our to-do list, we need to create our auth guard. So in our auth folder here, we will create authguard.ts file. So I'll say here auth.guard.ts, and this will block navigation so that user cannot access to-do list if they are not logged in, or they should only see their specific to-do list, okay. So we'll create export constant, and we are creating an auth guard, okay. So we'll say auth guard, and this will come from our can activate function. So this can activate function, it comes from Angular router, and what we'll do is here this takes two parameters, so route and the state, okay. We'll open our arrow bracket, and inside this we will inject our store and our router because we are going to be dealing with those like this, and we just need to inject them. So we'll import it, and same for our router like this. So inside the function here we will return, and we'll say return store.select. So we want to select our is logged in state. Okay, so for that we will import our selector here, auth selector. So we'll say import, and we'll say select is logged in from our auth.selector. Okay, so here we will select this, and we will say pipe on it, and inside the pipe we will use our take operator. So we will say take and one. Now why we are taking this is because we want to take the first emitted value which our selector emits, and we want to complete it. So after this take we will use our map operator, and here we will say whatever we get, which is our is logged in, right, from here. So we'll say is logged in. Okay, and we'll open an arrow bracket. Basically this is our true or false value we are getting at a point. So we'll say if is logged in is true, basically if user is logged in is at this point, then we will return true. Basically if user is logged in, then our auth guards should return true. Okay, so basically which means allowing navigation, user can go wherever he wants. Okay, but if it's not the case, then at that point, if our is logged in is false, then we want to take our router dot navigate, and here we will say navigate it to login. So if our is logged in is false, we want user to navigate to login page, and they shouldn't go to the to do or any other page. Okay, so that's it, and we will return false. So this will block navigation, and they wouldn't be able to go to any other page. They will be redirected back to our login. Okay, so we are completed our auth guard. Now we need to go inside our app routes and set up our app structure. So inside our app.routes, we need to set up all the routes here. So as you can see inside the routes, it has already created an empty routes here for us. So we'll create different routes. So one of them would be for login, register, and for our to-dos, right? So we have these three pages, one our login page, register page, and to-dos page. So we'll create routes for all of them. So here I have already created routes here, as you can see. So if our path is login, we want to load the component which is our login component. Don't worry, we will create all of these components, login, register, and to-do list later on in the video. Then if the path is register, we want to load the component which is our register component. And if our path is to-do, we want to load the to-do list component which we'll create. And with to-do list, we want to use our auth guard too. So here we will say can activate. So here you see it provides us with can activate property, and we'll say here auth guard. So auth guard. You see it comes from our auth.guard.ts file. So what this will do is it will protect our this to-dos route. So if the user is not logged in, they wouldn't be able to go to this to-dos route because of our auth guard, because it will go and see that if it's is logged in is true or not, and you know that is logged in here. If it's false, then they would be redirected back to our login page, and they wouldn't be able to go to this specific route. So if we have any other pages in our application, like different pages like employee page or something, then we can also put auth guard on that. So auth guard is a really important feature which helps us to protect routes in Angular. Okay, great. So now comes the interesting part. We are finally done with our authentication code, and now we can shift to finally our to-do list. So whenever user has logged in, registered, then what do we show them? We show after the user has logged in the to-do list, right? So now we will work on our to-do list, and we will create our to-do model like we did for the authorization. We created auth model. We'll create to-do action. We'll create to-do effect, to-do teaser, selectors, to-do service, almost same bit as this. And after that, we'll create our login and register component to show our to-do and our auth. So let's get started. And first we will create our to-do folder, and inside that we'll create our model. So inside the app folder, we will create a to-do folder too. So here we'll create a new folder, and we will call it to-dos. Okay, and inside this we can have all of our files such as to-do model.ts, actions, reducer, and our selectors. So first we'll start with our to-do model.ts. Okay, to-do.model.ts. Okay, so as you see our to-do list, what should a to-do list look like? So it has its unique ID, right? And it should have a user ID to represent which user's to-do list it is, right? And a task, the string task, as you see what we write, and the checkbox which shows completed property, if it's checked, like if it's completed or it's not. And we can have optional properties such as created at, so what time it was created. So we need to define our to-do interface. So we'll start here in the to-do model file. So we'll define our interface. We'll say export interface, and this will be our to-do interface. And here we'll have all the properties I mentioned. So ID of type string, user ID of type string, task of type string and completed property of type boolean, and we have optional property created at of type string. So if you see in our db.json file, this is our to-dos. It has a id, a user id, which should be basically equals to this id, and we have a task property. So what actually our to-do task is completed and created at there. So going back to our to-do model, now we will also declare our to-do state. Okay, so basically to-dos, what would we have? They have all the items, right? So we'll have items of type to-do, right? So this to-do array, and then we will have a loading. So we'll have a loading property, and that will be of type boolean. So this will be semicolon here, and we'll have last property, which is our error property, to represent if there is an error. So that will be of type string or null, like this. So that's it. We have defined our to-do state. Now we can go into to-do actions and start writing our actions as we did for our auth as well. So here I will create a new file and I'll call it todo.actions.ts. Great. So now if you think of to-do action, what would come into your mind? So first thing, again, you want to load the to-dos. So we'll have three actions: load to-dos, load to-do success, and failure. Then we want to add a to-do item, right? From, as you can see here on the screen, we want to add item. So that would be another action where we want to add to-do. So add to-do success and add to-do failure. Then we can even, you can see we can update the to-do as well here. See, I'll try to update this to-do and we can do that. So we can have another three action: update to-do success, and update to-do failure. And at the end, we can delete our to-do item. So for that, we can have a delete to-do, a delete to-do success, and a delete to-do failure. So I'll start with our load to-dos. Okay, so I'll create here export constant, and this would be load to-dos. Okay, so you see it's pretty easy when you think about it. And you look at your application and you see, okay, what actions would I need? So here inside this, we'll have our action message. It's pretty basic, like this. You can have your own string, which is easy for you to understand. Now after this, as we are loading the to-dos, we do not need to send any payload, so it will be just a plain action like this. Now we'll have another action, and this one would be our load to-do success. So again, this one would be to-do, and this time we are success, so we are dealing with our API. We've got a response at this point. So here I'll just write API, and what we are doing, we are getting our list back, right? So I'll say to-do list success, okay, like this. And this will have a props as well, because we will be receiving a payload as well, right, which is our to-do list for this specific user. So we'll have props here, and the props here will have object, and this will be basically our to-dos item, which will be of type to-do array, like this. So that's it. And just to close this off, we need to have our arrow bracket here and put a semicolon. So like this, we have a to-do success. So similar, we'll have a to-do failure too. So this is our actions for loading. Okay, loading to-dos, we have done the actions. Now we need to do for adding, updating, and deleting, as I mentioned. So I will not be discussing it in detail. I'll just be copying all those bits. Okay, so for add to do, we will have something like this. So we have add to do, we have a create action, and we have the message, which is add the to do. We have a props task of type string, because we want to add a task, right? So this time we will pass our task, which will be coming from our TS HTML front end. Okay, and for success, we receive the whole to do item. Okay, as you can see here. So, and for the failure, as similar as our error. That's it. So now what we will do is we will do for the update to do similar way. Okay, so for update, as you can see, we are passing here our to do item, and there we are passing our partial to do changes, whatever we would have. And update to do success, as you can see, it gives us the updated to do object. And failure, again, we have an error. So likewise, for our delete the to do, we have again, we pass our to do ID, because we want to delete a specific item from the to do list. So we'll just pass the ID and we will dispatch our action. And for the success, we have a props of to do ID as well. And for failure, again, we have our error. Okay, so we are done with our to do actions, but I just want to explain you a bit. So here in the delete to do, you see we send a to do ID, right? But why do we have a to do ID here as well? So this is because whenever from our front end we want to delete a to do item, that time we dispatch this action, right? And then this action goes and deals with the backend, and then it receives a success. So at that time we need this to do item, so that in order to, we take this to do item, tell our reducer that, you know what, the success has been happened, and from the DB the item has been removed, so we need to remove it from the UI too. So this success, this will make sure that it calls our reducer and it updates our list. and it will remove the specific to do item. Okay, so that was just a detailed explanation of why do we have the item here, right? That's it. So now we will start with our to do reducer file. So inside the to do folder here, I'll create a new file. So as you know, we have a feature key for each of our state. So for to do, we'll have a to do feature key. Okay, now we need to define our initial state for our to do. We have already defined the interface in our to do model, so we'll just initialize it. So here we'll define our to do initial state. Okay, now we can go and define our to do reducer. So I'll say here export constant, and this will be our to do's reducer. Okay, coming from create reducer, open the bracket here, and now here we'll have initial to do state. Okay, and after this we'll have our different on functions to handle our different to do actions. So we need to import all of the to do actions first in order to use them. Actions. Okay, so now we have access to all the to do actions. So here I'll say to do actions. So first one we want to take care of is load to do's. So we'll say dot load to do's, and then what we'll do is here we'll take our state like this. We'll open our arrow bracket, and then inside this we'll take our state and we'll change the properties we need to change. So at this point we are loading, right? So we are loading our to do. So we'll say loading should be true, and our error property that should be null, like this. So we have written our first on reducer function here, and now we can go and keep writing more of them. So for on to do actions dot load task success and load task failure as well. So I'll say on to do actions dot load task success, and then this one would be again have our state as you remember, and if you remember the load to do success have our updated to do's, right, which we get from the backend. So we'll have our to do's here like this. We'll open our arrow bracket, and here inside we will take our state. Okay, and after this we have our items. So items would be equal to this to do's we get, right, from our to do success. So that's it, we just need to update it. And another thing we can update is our loading property. At this point we are done with our loading, we're not loading anymore, so we'll set it as false. So similarly we'll have our to do failure to messages like that. So you see how easy it is to write our reducer functions here, and this will update our state. Then after this we can create a selector file and we can get whatever state we need. So similarly we will do it for our add to do's, then we'll do it for our update to do's. Okay, and then at the end we'll do it for our delete to do's. So we've created actions for all of this, so it's pretty easy to create the reducer as well. Okay, so we'll start with add to do's now. Now for adding the to do's, so here as well we will handle the three actions. First is our add to do, our success, and our failure. So on the basic where we are adding the to do, we will make our loading as true because at this point we are doing a adding process. And at success we will update our items, as you can see. So for example, if we have two items in our to do list and we want to add a third one, then we will add it like this. So we take the items and we update it with the extra item. That's it. And for failure, we just update our error message and we say that it failed to add the to do item, and obviously make our loading as false. So likewise we'll have for our update as well. So I'll copy all of this here, and this one would be here. So this would be update to do. Okay, like this. Again we will have our loading as true and error as null. It's pretty much same bit. And on update to do, this would be update to do success. Okay, this one. And here we have our to do item. Then we make our loading as false as usual. And we take our item and we need to find the item which we need to update, right? Makes sense. So for that we will map over our items and find the ID which matches and update it. Okay. So here I'll clear this and I'll say state dot items, and I want to map over it because I want to find the specific item which you want to update, right? So I'll say item, each item go over it, and if item dot ID, this one, if it matches to our to do dot ID, so the one we pass through our action, so to do dot ID. So if they both matches, it is the one we want to update it, right? So if that is the case, then I'll use my operator here and I'll say replace it with this to do. Otherwise, do not replace. So return the item like this. So that's it. And now for our update to do failure, we'll make it update to do failure here, and we'll update our error message to say it update to do. So fail to update the to do list. That's it. So you see how easy it is. Now our last action to do is whenever we want to specifically delete a to do item, right? So if you see in our action, we have got this one, right? Delete. So we are going to go in the reducer and we are going to create all the three actions for our delete to. So I'll just copy these here and I'll paste it. And this will be our delete to do, and this will be all same again. and this would be delete to do success. So, and same as our update, in this case we pass our to do ID, right, instead of the to do item. So we take this ID and then we remove this bit. So this time we need to filter the items and return the item which doesn't match this specific ID. So that is how we delete. So then return, that's it. So what it will do, these items, it will filter the item which specifically matches to this to do ID, and we will have our list with this specific item being deleted. Okay, so now we need to do our delete to do failure, this one, and at this case we couldn't delete it for some reason, so we are going to pass in the message here and we'll say fail to delete to do. That's it. So now we are officially done with whole of our reducer. So now we can actually go and focus on our to do selector, where we will actually get different parts of our data. Okay, so we'll create our to do selector here. So to do dot selectors.ts. So first thing which we need to do is we need to select our full to do list state. Okay, so for that I'll say export constant and we'll say select to do state. Okay, full to do state. Again, this would be coming from create feature selector. I hope you know, learning from the last auth one. And again, this will be of type to do state. Okay, so here we'll have to do model, so it will be basically this whole state we are tracking over, and we'll have our feature key here. So feature key, if you remember, it was this one. In the beginning we created this to do feature key. So if you want, you can just take this feature key and directly put it here like this. So even this would solve our problem. We do not have to import it, right? And now we can start selecting all of the state we need. So I need three stuffs. One, I need my items. So whenever my items have been changing for any kind of action, I need to get that updated items. So I need to select my item state, okay? And then I need my loading state. So whenever there is a process going on, I can show a spinner or a heading or let user know, don't show any other page for now because it's been loading. Or if there is an error, then I need to get my error state. So only these three states I need to get. So as this is pretty easy, I've just got all of them here. We just need to import our selector and explain you how they work. So here we want to select the whole to-do list. So for that, we are selecting the whole state and then we are getting our items from it. So like this state.items. Pretty similar we have done for our loading. So select to-do's loading and select to-do's error. So I hope you get it, as this is pretty easy. Now we will create our to-do service, which will actually communicate with our localhost 3000/to-dos, right? Same how we did for our users. So I'll create the service and I'll call it todo.service.ts. That's it. So first we will create our class and we'll call it to-do service. Okay. And I'll make this injectable in our root level. So make it injectable. And we'll provide it in root like this. Great. So now we need to inject our HTTP client, as we will be dealing with our HTTP request, right? So here I have HTTP client injected and I'll just need to import it from Angular core. Same goes for HTTP client, we need to import it. And now, so our to-do service will be dealing with our HTTP localhost 3000/to-dos, right? As we will be updating our to-dos, deleting, adding them and all the other things like getting them. So we need to store that into a private variable. So we'll store it into private to-dos URL and it will be our http/localhost:3000 and it will be /to-dos like this. So now we need to define 4 methods. So one would be to get our to-dos, right? So we need to get all the to-dos for specific users. So we need a get to-dos method, then we need a add to-do, and then we need a update to update our to-do list, and then to delete our to-do item. So we need a delete to-do. So we need to implement all of these 4 methods. Okay. So we'll start with the get to-dos. So this is the easiest one. So we do get to-dos and we are trying to get to-do for a specific user. So when do we want to get to-do list for a specific user? We need the user ID for that, right? So we need to pass our user ID. That will be of type string. Okay. And this method basically, it will be observable of type to-do array. Crazy. Like this. So now what we need to do is we need to return our list. So for that we will be using our get call. So we'll say this .http.get and we need to pass our to-do list. And first we should define what kind of list is it. So this would be to-do array, what we want to receive like this. And we need to pass the URL where we want to make this request to. So this is our URL, to-do's URL, right? This one. So we'll be using back syntax because we'll make it dynamic. So we'll use dollar here. We'll say this dot to do's URL, go to this URL, and we want to query. So query because we want to fetch specific to this user ID, right? So we'll use question mark here like this, and we'll pass our user ID. So user ID that will be equals to our dollar, the user ID which we pass. Okay, so here, that's it. So this should basically give us. And why do we have user ID here is because if you go into our db.json, you can see here that we have got this user ID here. So we're trying to match the path. We go to this, we try to match this user ID, and we say it should be equals to the user ID of what the user has got. So this user ID, you see, they are matching. Great. So if I go back to my to-do service here, once I've got this, so it would give me a response, right? So we pipe it, and for some reason if there is an error, then we pass that error. So we say this dot handle error, and like how I did in previous service, I'll also create a private method where we'll handling our error. Okay, so we'll say this dot handle error here. So here this will be our basically handle error method. You can see, so it takes the error whatever we receive, and then it should be of observable, and then we just get basically here it is this kind of error. Then we return a throw error, just import it. Basically whatever the error is, we just say that it's a to-do service error. Okay, so I'll just put it at the end just to make things clear. Now same we'll do for our add to do. And now for adding the to do item, you have to remember in this case we want to add it to a specific user, right? So for that we'll have our add to do method here, and you'll see what I do. So we have two parameters here. So one would be the task which you want to add, other would be the user ID. So to which user we want to add this new to do task. So we'll have task first of type string, okay, and we'll have user ID that will be of type string. Okay, and then this method here, it will again will be of observable, and this will be of type to do, like this. So this is the response we are expecting to get back. Now here we will make our object which will make our whole new to do task, right? So here we are just passing the string, the task which user is writing in the UI, right? We need to convert it to a whole to do item, like it should have a checkbox and all the other things. So we'll create the new to do item here. So we'll say new to do, okay, that should be of type this to do, okay, and we'll initialize it now. Okay, so we'll give it ID. So ID should be a unique ID. I'll show you later on how to do that. And we need to pass the user ID of the user, right? So we'll say user ID here. We'll have the task itself, what the user writes, and we'll have the completed property which should be false in the beginning. Okay, and we have the created at. So you remember we have the created at property which should be, we can make it like this. So you can see it should be new date, and we make it to ISO string like this. So that's it. It just gives us what time it was created. That's it. And now to giving our ID, so this should be unique ID. So you remember in our authentication, so auth service, if you go, we had a unique ID for our register as well. So the same way we'll do it here. So I'll go here and import it, and I'll be using it as UUID like this. And you see, now we have got the unique ID for each of the tasks as well there. So at this point we have got our new to do. Now we need to make the request to our this URL and add the task there. Okay, so after this we will return, and as we want to add a task, so we want to do a post request. So we'll say this.http.post, and here we will do request to this, again this URL, right? So this should be of type, so here it will be basically to do. The response which we should receive is of to do here. Okay, and here we'll pass the URL. So we'll say this.todo's URL. So we don't need to do all of this query stuff. We just want to post. So for that it's pretty easy. You just pass whatever URL you want to pass the data to, and you pass your data. So in our case the data is new to do, this one. That's it. Now After Effects, what you want to do is pipe and catch if there is an error. So we'll say catch error, and we pass our handle error here. That's it. This is just basic validation, error checking. And after this we are actually done with our add to do method. Now we can focus on our update to do method. So now to update an existing to do item, we'll declare our update to do method, and this method will take multiple parameters. So when I want to update the item, I only want to update the properties which I have changed, and not change the whole item. So for that I will be using partial property of TypeScript. So I'll send my object, I'll call it to do update, and this will be of type partial. So it's a utility provided by TypeScript and this will be of type to do. So what it does, it whenever we send a item of type to do, it makes all the properties inside to do as optional, right? So if we have only changed this property, it will send only this property, so it wouldn't care if all of these properties wouldn't exist, it's fine. So I'll do that. I'll make it of type to do, but you remember that every time we want to update a to do item, we need to send its id to, right? So for that I'm using the end variable here, and I'm making my id, the id we have in to do, this one, I'm making this as not optional, so it should be permanent, like we should be able to update the to do item only which has the id, so when we receive the item, it should have of type id to here. So that is what I have done with using this and here. I have made all the items in the to do optional, but not the id. That's it, because we would need the id to update a specific to do item, right? So that's it. And obviously we need to send the user id to the user who's trying to update the specific to do, so we need to send its id to for authentication purposes. So this will be of type string, and this would be full of type observable of type to do. There we go. So now we need to return, so we'll say here return this dot http dot get. So we'll make a get request, find the specific to do item, update it. So here this would be of type to do there, and inside this we need to pass our urls. So we'll have backticks here, and here I'll use the dollar observable. In the bracket I'll say this dot to do url, and inside this we want to go to specific our id, which has basically this to do item. So for that I'll say to do update this one, and I want to go to this specific id which has this item, so to do update dot id. So what this will do is it will fetch us the specific to do item, and then we will pipe, and inside this we will map the to do item. So here we'll map over the to do item, open our arrow bracket, and now we'll do the authentication, because we only want the authentic user to update that to do item and not any some random users by guessing a to do id, right? So we'll check if the user which is logged in, if its user id is equal to the 1 in the to do, then only we'll be able to allow them to edit it. Okay, so we'll say here if to do dot user id, basically if it is not equals to the user id which we pass, this one, which means it is not the user which is logged in, right? So this user is not authorized to log in, so we need to throw error. So here we'll say throw, and we'll say new error, and here we'll pass the message saying that unauthorized to update this to do there. But if it is not the case, then we can say after this return to do. That's it. So here we have just done, if you can see, we have done a basic authentication, and we are only returning it the item which you want to update only if they pass this authentication check. Okay, once they have done this, after this we'll use switch map, because now we want to actually update it. So whenever we want to update the item, we can use our patch. So we'll say this dot http, and we'll use dot patch, and this will again be of type to do here. So we'll have to do here, and here will be pass our dynamic url. So we'll use $, we'll say this dot to do's url. So after this, now we'll go to the specific to do item and update it. So we'll say to do update dot id, and after this we need to pass the to do update item. So that's it. So you can see what I've done. I've used switch map. I got the result from here, basically just got my to do item. So I'm using the http patch to update my to do item. So going to the url to the specific id, and then updating it with this to do update. Okay, and if it is not the case, basically if there's a problem here, so we can catch error, and we'll pass our this dot handle error here. So that's it. So you see how smartly we have done like a basic check before allowing user to edit the to do item, right? So now after this we are going to focus on our delete to do. Okay, so this one. Okay, so for delete to do, I've already got it here. I'll just explain you what I've done. So it takes a to do id of type string and a user id of type string. Okay, so again, when we want to delete it, what we do is we try to get the object first we want to delete, right? So we do a http get request, we go to the specific to do id, find that item, and then we do a authorization check how we did for our update. Because we pass our user id here, we see if they are not equal, then make them not authorized. But if they are equal to the user id, it means they are a valid user, then we return the to do. Okay, and then we use switch map, we go over the item and do our delete call over this specific item, and that's it. And if there is an error, then we should catch it from this catch error method. So with this, we are actually done with all of our to do services method, which is create, update, read, and delete. Now we will create our to do effects file where we will handle all the side effects. Okay, So inside the to-dos folder, we'll create our to-do effect file. So I'll call it todo.effects.ts. Now we'll declare our class. So now we will quickly inject the action, service, and store in order to use our effects. So we need to import our inject here, and we also need to import our actions, our service, and all of the other stuff. Okay, so now we will have 4 side effects which we will handle. One is for our load to-dos, okay. Other would be for our update. Then we'll have for our add to-do and for our delete, okay. So we need to create all of these side effects. So we'll start with the load to-do first. So we'll say load to-dos, obviously define it by $. We'll use our create effect, okay. Open the arrow bracket, and inside this now we need to define our action type. So we'll say this dot action $.5. Open this, and now what kind of action do we want this effect to be triggered on? So that would be our to-do actions dot load to-dos, right? So we'll use auth type, which comes from NgRx effect, and inside this we need to inject our action. So I will import all the actions. So I'll say import asterisk. So now on specific this action, which is our to-do actions dot load to-dos. So specific this action, we want to trigger this effect, okay. So only then this will get called. So we'll do this, and now what we want to do, now when we want to load the to-do, we want to do a check, and we want to get our current user ID from our auth state. So you see we can get everything because everything is stored in our store. So we are going to go to our auth store, this one, and we will get the current user ID. Only then we will load our to-do list, okay. So for that we will use with latest from. So we can use this from RxJS, okay. So we'll use with latest from, and inside this we'll say this dot store dot select because we want to get the value. So we'll use our selector, and inside this we need to use our auth selector. So we are going to be importing our auth selector as well. So it would be coming from auth, okay. So like this auth dot selectors there. So we are using it to get our user ID. Now inside this we can say auth selectors dot, and now you can see we can get our user ID. So this is the one, select user ID, okay. So after this we will use our filter, and here we will do a basic validation. So we will check if our user ID is not equal to null, then only we will continue. So here inside this we'll open our brackets, and inside this we'll put both of our data. So one is our action, okay, and other is our user ID. So user ID which is coming from this with latest from, okay. Now we take both of them and open our arrow bracket, and here we say if user ID, if it's not equals to null, basically, okay, like this. Then only we will continue, and after this basically we will use our exhaust map. So there again we'll get our latest data. So we'll use exhaust map here, and again inside this we'll have our action and user ID, both the data we are getting, action this one and our user ID, okay, like this. Again open our arrow bracket, and inside this now we can write our logic. The logic is basically to call our service, right, which again go and handle our backend. So here we'll call our service. So we'll say this dot to do service dot, so load to do. So we'll call our get to do's here, and what you remember the get to do's method, what it expect. So in the to do service, you remember this method we have, it takes our user ID, right. So we need to pass our user ID, and we are getting user ID from this with latest from, remember this one. So we pass this user ID here, and our service at this point will go and talk to our backend and give us a response. So we're going to pipe that, okay. So we'll open this pipe, and here we'll get the data. So we'll map, and obviously we'll get a to do. So we will loop over the to do's, open our arrow bracket, and now inside this we will have our load success action, right. So here we'll say to do actions dot load to do success, this one, and inside this remember we have the props, which is our to do's. So these to do's we get from the backend, okay, from our json-server. And we also need to handle our failure case. So after this map here we'll put a comma, and we'll put a catch error. So inside catch error we'll pass our error property, whatever we get we'll use off to make it observable, and here we'll say to do actions dot load failure, so this one, and obviously pass our error property inside it. So that's it. Okay, so we are getting an error here, but if we put undefined sign here and you say it's gone. So that's it. Now we will go on our add to do's effect. So same how we do for load to do's, the logic would be same for add as well. We'll try to add the data, then we'll have a load success, and we'll have a load failure, pretty much same. So here I'll go and copy this load to do effect, okay. So I'll copy it, and this would be finished here. So I'll copy pretty much same, and I will start refactoring it. So this would be add to do, create effect same, and this would be colon our add to do. Okay, and this would again we will need our user ID, which will be same, and then we'll filter it pretty much same again, basic validation, use exhaust map. And this time that this dot to do service, what we want to do, we want to add our to do, because we don't want to load, we want to add the to do, right? So we'll do add to do. And if you remember, in our add to do, we take our task and our user ID. So we need to pass both of the data. So here inside in the action we have the data, you can see. So I'll go here and I'll pass action, and you will see it will come. So you see action.task is coming. So we just need to pass action.task, and obviously we need to pass user ID too, because in our add to do we pass both of the stuff, task and our user ID. So we are passing task like this, and we are passing our user ID as well. And after this would be a single to do object, right? Because we want to add, and this would be our add to do success, and we'll pass this to do like this. So that's it. And now for our failure as well, we need to handle, and this would be add to do failure. Okay, so now it would be pretty much same as you got the idea for our update and for our delete as well. So I will just copy for update and delete with the updated to do. Okay, and if there is a catch error, then we handle that using update to do failure. Now delete would be the easiest one, so I'll go in here. So as you can see, for delete to do, again we have got like pretty much same bit, and instead of this time we'll be passing our to do ID specifically, because we want to remove it. The service will do the logic of removing. We just get our success, and we pass to do ID, which is our action.todo ID like this, and we pass it because later on we will be using this success, and it will go and update our reducer, right? And reducer, through that we will be updating our front end. So I hope you understand the logic of how the success and failure works, and if there is a problem, we catch it using this delete to do failure. So that's pretty much it for our effects. So you see, in our effects we learn with, latest, from, and other RxJS method too. So now comes the most important part and the final bit, which is to design our UI. So now we are going to be designing our register, our login, and our to-do list component. So let's get started with that. Okay, so we'll open the terminal and we'll run the command to create our register, login, and to-do list. So we'll create register and login component inside the auth folder, and our to-do list component inside the to-dos. So I'll run this command, and they will create the particular folders inside them. Okay, so you can see inside the auth we have got login and register with all of the files we need, HTML, CSS, and TS. Same for our to-dos, we have got the to-do list component, which will show our to-do list. Okay, so we will continue the same process how we do it. First we will complete our register path, then our login, and at the end we will do our to-do list. So I'll go in register component TS file. So we'll inject our store as usual. We just need to import both of this. So we'll import it. Okay. Okay, so now in order to load the register data, we need to start initializing our observables. So if you remember, one thing we had is our isLoading. So we are going to state the isLoading state. So we'll use our observable. So it will be of type observable, and this would be boolean, right? So it will tell us if it's loading or not, true or false. Easy. So we are going to do that here, and like this, and we'll have for our error as well. So error, this would be of type observable as well, and error, you know, it would be of type string or null. So string or null. Again, we'll put an indefinite sign here, and the error is gone. Great. So now we will initialize our constructor, and inside the constructor we will fill up both of these values. Okay, so you remember we get the data from our store, which is our selector, right? So auth selector. So in order to use that, we need to import our auth selector here. Now inside the constructor we'll initialize both of these values. So I'll say this dot is loading, this would be this dot store dot select. So we are going to select the state, and what you want to select, we want to select our loading. So I'll say from auth selector dot, you can see, select auth loading. So it will give us if our auth is loading or not yet whenever we want to register the user. Then we'll have our error, this one. So we can get whatever data we want using our selectors. So all the stuff we have already created inside our auth here, all of this. Okay. Okay, now, so as for our register component, we have a register form, right? So for that form, we will have a onSubmit method. So I'll initialize all of this now, and then I'll jump to my HTML. So we'll have onSubmit method here, and inside the onSubmit, we will have a form here. So in order to use our form, we need to import our forms module and the other module we need inside the imports. So one of the module we'll need is common module, and we'll also need our forms module, so we need to import it first in order to use it. So here we will import our forms module and ng form, okay, as we'll be using a template driven form for now. So here if we go now, we should be able to use our forms module, okay, and we will be also needing our router link as well, so I'll import that too. Okay, so for submitting the form here, we will have a form which will be of type ng form, okay, you can see. Now here we will basically submit our form. So you remember, to submit the form we take three details, which is our name, email and password. So we'll have name, email and our password, and this will be coming from our this form data. So we'll say form.value like this, okay. And once we have got all of this data, then we will do a dispatch action with all of these details, okay. So for that, now this is the place where we actually start the process. As soon as the user take these details from the HTML, okay, into the form, then it dispatches the specific store action using our register action. So you see this is the store dispatch, and here we need to have our auth actions. So we need to import our auth actions as well, like how we imported our selector, our auth actions here. So what I want to do, whenever user clicks on submit, I want to submit a register dispatch action, right? So here I'll say auth actions dot. So what I want to do at this point, register user, that's it. So register the user, and if you remember, register user takes a prop, which is our credentials. So our credentials are these three details which we already have here, right? So here we'll pass our credentials, and this would be our name, our email and our password. So you see, that's it. We have successfully written our dispatch and our whole register component logic, because as you know, most of the logic happens in our services and effects. So there's so minimal code which we have to write for registering. We just get the data and dispatch our action. That's it. And we can just put a validation check here. So here we can say if form.invalid, then we just want to return it. That's it. So now we will go into our HTML and write our template code. So in the HTML file, I'll remove this, and here I've already written the HTML code, as the video is getting really long. So as it's pretty easy, so I hope you will understand. I'll just go through it. So what I've done is I've got a register heading here, then I've created my form, okay, this form, and here I have defined my register form, which is coming from ng form. I've got the onSubmit basically, which takes our register form. This is the method which gets called whenever user submits on submit, okay, this one. So whenever user will go and submit on this button, as you can see here, this one, which will show register, that time this method will get triggered and it will submit our form. So you can see the button here, I have made it conditional. So when the user have clicked the button, at that time user is registering his details to the backend. So that time we will rename it to registering and show them as that, you know, the data is loading. But if they're not done that at the point, so basically is loading would be false, then we will show it as register. So you see how smartly we have used our button component here, and we haven't written two separate headings. We just use one heading to show both of the feature, which is registering and register. Okay, and for error, if there is an error, then we go use our ngIf. Obviously we use our async pipe, both the places. Here as well we use our async pipe to load the data, and we show the error. And we have got a p tag here saying if you already have an account, then you should go and log in. And we have provided our router link, which will take them to our login page. That is the reason I have used my router link here as well. And as far as CSS is concerned, I have already got the CSS as well, which I'll paste here, and that's it. So now do not worry about all of this code, as I'll be putting the GitHub link where you can get the HTML, CSS and all of the code, pretty much the whole project from there. So you can get all of this stuff here. The important thing is to understand, so which is our mostly TS and HTML. So I hope you understood this bit. Okay, so likewise we will do our login component, which is even easier than the register. So we will go into the login component file. So here I've already got the code, as you can see, just pretty much same login component. I've injected my store as we did for register. Is loading an error observable. We are loading them using our store, okay. And as you remember, for logging, we only take our email and password. So we get that from our form, from the HTML, and we dispatch our login user this time. And we pass our credentials, which are our email and password. So now we will go and define our HTML code. Okay, so pretty much same here. We have got our login form here, as you can see. It takes our data, okay, and on this button submit, and whenever user clicks on the login button, it clicks this on submit button and it fills up the form, and then it dispatches our action, which sends data to our store. And then our store deal with our effects, our service, updates the backend, updates the reducer, in turn updates our UI, okay. So the later fields you can see is pretty much same. So actually that is it for our login component. There's not much. Only thing we need to do is put our CSS. So for login, I have pretty much got the same CSS. So I'll just take it from the register component. I'll copy it and put the CSS here. So that's it. Perfect. So now we're done with our login component. Now comes the most important component, which is our to-do list component. This is the component which we will show after user has successfully registered and then logged in. So after they have authenticated, we will be showing our to-do list component. So let's go into to-do list component TS file and let's define our logic. So here, first thing we'll do is we'll have a div. Inside the div, we'll have a h2 and we'll say this should be like to-do list, okay, like this. Now after this, we'll have a form, and inside the form, we will have our form fields. So if you remember, only field we have is our input basically, because we just want to write a to-do list data, right? And the input would be of type tags, and then obviously we'll be using our ng model. So I'll connect my ng model here, and we want to bind it to a property. So this property will be the one which we'll be keeping track of. So this should be our new task. So we'll call it new task, and we will name it new task here as well, new task, like this. Now we can give it a placeholder too, and we'll call it, that's it. Now one thing we need to make sure is this shouldn't be an option property. So this should be required all the time in order to fill the form, okay? And then we will have a button here, so to submit the form here, right? So this would be of type submit, and we'll call this button add task. So it's allowing us to add our task, right? And we can put some validation on this button, such as this. So we'll make our button disabled if the new task, it doesn't exist, or if our loading is still going on. At that time, we don't want user to submit the form, okay? So you can see here. Okay, and finally we'll have a ng submit on this form. So this will trigger our add to do method inside the TS file, which will dispatch our form submit action, okay? So after the form, we'll have other fields such as this too. So we will use our async pipe on our isLoggedIn and our error observable. So both of the observables will help us to enhance our user experience. So if there is an error, it will take the async pipe, okay, get the data and show it. Same goes if the tasks are still loading for because of some API delay, then we'll be showing them loading task, okay? Now at the end, if none of this happens, then we will have our code to show the data. So you can see I've got a UL here, so undefined list, and will only show if our is loading, basically. This one is not existing, basically if this is false, and our error is false. So basically there's no error and the loading is also done. Basically we are saying this is false. Then only we want to show them our to-do list. So we are extracting them as to-dos. Now you see we have got another validation. So if our to-dos.length equals to 0, which is possible, we do not have any to-dos, then we do not want to show them anything. So we show them no task yet, add 1. And at the end now, when we know none of these are the cases, okay? Then after here, finally we have got our list item, where you can see we are using ng to go over all the to-do list item, okay, which we'll be getting in our TS file, and I'll show you how we get them. Okay, so inside the for loop, you can see I've got two divs. One is when we are not editing the to-do item, and one where we are. So when we are not editing a to-do item, I'm checking it using editing to-do. So I will create this variable inside the TS file, and every time we click on the edit, we will fill up this, and we'll check if the ID matches to the one which we are looping over. In this case, it's not. Then we will show them start, edit, and delete to do, you know, all the other actions. And we'll just fill the other fields like this. Fill our to-do task, okay? And if it is not the case, which means we are actually editing that particular to-do task, which is editing to-do.id when it matches our to-do.id. So then we are showing our input. So in the input, we have got our task, which is our updated task. So we are filling this field in our TS file, which I'll show using ng model, okay? So this is the task we'll be updating. So we have got two actions. One is to save the edit and cancel the edit. So when user clicks on save edit, we dispatch our save action, and cancel, we dispatch nothing. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Okay, so now I'll replace it with this code. So what I've done is I have given it class names and all the other stuffs we need for our CSS, but the logic is still same what I explained you guys. Now we'll go into our TS and start writing the logic as I mentioned. So first thing which we'll do is we will import our common module and our forms module as we need in our HTML. So inside the imports here, we will have common module and we will have our forms module as well, like this. Now we'll go here and implement our on init. So now what we will do is we will inject our store and our other observables as we use it for all the other values. Now we have three observables if you remember in our to do. So I'll go again and show you. So inside our reducer, you can see we have got items, loading, and error. So we need to handle all of this state, right? So here I will have three observables. Now we'll go into our constructor and we'll initialize these values, okay? So now inside this constructor, we need to initialize all of these values, okay? So in order to use that, we need to import our selector, which is our to-do selector, okay? That's it. Now inside the constructor, we can easily initialize them as you can see. So this dot to-dos would be our to-do selector dot select all to-dos. We get our loading from select to-do loading and our to-do error for this one. That's it. Now inside the ng on init, what it means. So when our user has logged in and then he can go to this page, right? He'll be able to go to our to-do list. So when this method will be called ng on init, every time user go to this page, this method will be called. So that time we want to load our to-dos, right? And what can we do to load our to-dos? So we can dispatch our load to-dos action. So for that we'll say this.store.dispatch, and here we need our actions, right? To do action in order to dispatch it. So we'll import it and they'll be coming from our to do actions. So you see, it's pretty easy. So we'll say to do actions dot load to dos. That's it. So this dispatch will make sure it goes and it triggers our effect and our services and get all the data and fill up in this to do. So pretty easy, right? Now we need to go and define our other methods. So if you remember, for adding the to do here, you can see whenever we want to add the to do, we have this add to do. So we need to define this method. And then later on we need to define our start edit, delete to do, save edit, cancel edit, and all of these methods. So we'll define our add to do method here. So in order to add our to do, you remember we have this new task variable. So we need to define these variables as well. So I'll go here and I'll define the variables. So we have new task and this will be of type string. We have editing to do. So whenever we'll be editing the to do, we'll fill up this bit. And we have our updated task, which will be of type string. And we need to import this to do here. So like this. And for this one, we just need to import our observables. Okay. And you see the errors are gone. And now for adding the to do, we'll have a basic check and we'll say if this dot new task, okay, dot trim, we'll get it. And we'll say if this doesn't exist, then we do not want to go ahead with it. So we want to return. So here we'll say return. That's it. But if it is not the case, then we will dispatch our add action. So we'll say this dot store dot dispatch and we can write our to do actions dot. So what we want to do, we want to add the task. So we'll say add to do. And if you remember, this takes a props of task. So this is the task, this new task. So we'll pass it here. So task would be equals to this dot new task dot trim. Okay, that's it. So we have written our dispatch as well. So this will make sure to add our new task. Now for user experience, when we dispatch our add to do, right, we want to make sure that our form is empty again. So user can submit the next task. So we'll say this dot new task and this should be equals to empty string. That's it. Great. So after this, we can define our other methods. So you can see we have got a toggle complete method here, this one. So whenever we want to check or uncheck, complete a task or uncomplete, we use this method. So we need to define it. So here I'll define the method toggle complete and it takes our to do, right? So we'll have our to do, which will be of type to do. Okay. And now we will fill the updated data, whatever user does, like if he checks or unchecks. So we need to get the data. So we'll say constant updated to do, and this will be, we'll take the data. So we'll say to do. And we will take our completed property. So we'll take completed property here, and this will be equals to our opposite of whatever user does. So to do completed like this. So if user has, so for example, if it was clicked and this method is called, which means user has unchecked it. Or if it was unchecked already and this method is called, which means user checked it. So we are making it opposite of whatever it was, as you can see here. Then we just need to dispatch our action. So this dot store dot dispatch, and what is this? We are changing some part of our to do, right? Which is we are updating a to do. So we need to dispatch our update action. So we'll say to do actions dot update to do. And you remember it take partial property. So it will take this partial property, which is our update to do. So here inside the object here, we'll pass our to do data, which is our updated to do. You see? So this was the whole partial thing I explained how it works, right? And then we'll have our delete to do as well. So this is pretty easy. I've got it here. You can see we're just using a JavaScript confirm dialog box that are you sure you want to delete the task, and if they are, then we dispatch our delete to do, which passes our to do ID. That's it. And after this, we will have our start edit and cancel edit. So whenever user is editing that time, and whenever user is not editing, so it's canceling the edit. So these two methods for those, start edit and cancel edit. So here we are doing pretty basic stuff. We are cloning our data. So taking this to do, storing it inside this dot editing to do, okay? And then whatever user updates it with this to do, so we take the to do task and put it inside the updated task. And if he actually saves it, that time we will send this updated task, okay? But if he cancels, then we are making our edited to do as null and updated task as empty. So now here we'll have, so here if you see, this is where he's saving the task. So I'm saying if this dot editing to do, if this exists, which means like, yeah, he is editing, he started that it, and updated task dot trim is not empty, like he's got some value inside it, right? That time we'll take our to do update, okay? So we will take the rest of the properties as same, and we'll update our task property with the updated task. So whatever user has written, as you can see here. And then we're just dispatching our action, which is update to do, which is same as this one. And we are sending this updated to do list. And at the end, we are calling our cancel edit because we're just making everything is null. Because once the process is done, we are initializing our variables, basically, pretty much it. So now in our HTML I can see there's error, so just need to take this and there's a typo. So yeah, just the case sign, and now you see all of the errors are gone. So this is pretty much done with our TS and our HTML. Now I'll just go in the CSS file and give some styling to our to-do list. So I've already got the styling. You can also get the styling from the GitHub link as I mentioned. Now that's it. We are pretty much done with whole of our to-do, our register and our login. Okay, so now we need to provide the overall layout and how we will handle the login, logout and everything. So inside our app component, we'll do that. So we'll go into our app component.html and define our layout. So I'll remove all of these bits first, okay? And I have got this HTML already here. So you can see I've got a nav bar, pretty basic stuff, okay? And here I'm showing my to-do list. As you can see, I'm showing my to-dos. So, okay, and here you can see I've got the router link to to-dos, and I'm only showing this if ngIf is logged in. Otherwise, no, okay? Now after this, here we've got our nav bar, and here we've got the user authentication bit. So you can see I've got the user observable, and we show the user.name and user email, which you can see on the right hand side of the UI. We've got our button here for our logout, and here we've got our login and register, as you can see. And make sure that you've got router outlet here so that you can see all of these pages in action. Now we'll go inside the component file. And first of all, I have a lot of imports where I've imported my auth actions, my auth selectors, my user model, and all the router and other bits, common module, which we need. So now inside the import section, we will import all the things. Great. So now we will implement our onInit here, okay? And we will define our ngOnInit. So that's it. Great. Now we need to inject our store and our router, okay, in order so that user can move from one page to another. Now for our isLoggedIn, we need to know, right, if the user is logged in or not. Then only we will be showing them this page. So if user is not logged in, we won't be showing them our to-do list. So we need to get this data. So, and now after this, we will also have our user observable. So you can see here, we've got the user observable. That's where we get our user details, like its name and email, right, for the UI. So we need to have our user observable here as well. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Now we need to go and initialize both of them as usual in our constructor. We will initialize both of them. So here you can see we have used our store select. We've got auth selectors dot select is logged in. So we get our is logged in here. So every time using constructor, we'll get this. And then user, we will use the same. So auth selectors dot select user. We'll get the particular user. And once we have got the user, then we can have their name and their email, right? So yeah. Now after this, in ngOnInit, we do not need anything, I guess, for now. So I'll comment it out. And we have our logout method. So when user here, you can see that in the HTML file here, I've got the logout. So when user wants to log out, which means he wouldn't be having this variable logged in false, right? And he wouldn't be able to see our to-do list. And he'll be redirected back to our login page. So we need to write logic in the logout. So what we need to do, we need to dispatch our logout action. So we'll dispatch and we'll call it auth actions dot logout. That's it. So with this code now, our user will be logged out, and for the user to redirect back to our login page, we have handled all of that in our effect. And last thing left is our CSS. So again, I've got some CSS, which I'll put it here. Now we need to connect whole of our application, which is state management, register, our effect, store, and all the other stuff. So we need to go into our appconfig.ts file and do all of this bit. So I'll format it with prettier, so it's easier for us to read. Okay. Great. So as you can see, like our routes, some of the things are already registered here, but we need to still register our feature state slices, such as our auth and our to-do. We need to register both of them. Also, we need to register our HTTP client. So let's get started with it. Okay, so first thing, we need our auth reducer, our auth effect, our to-do reducer, and to-do effect. So I'm going to import all of them here. So from auth, from to-dos, then auth effect and to-do effect, okay? Because we need to register them, so we need to import them, right? So here, after this, first thing we are going to do is persist our auth state. Okay, so whenever user, you remember, whenever user refresh the screen, they need to be still logged in or logged out, right? So in order to make sure that they're still there, we are going to use state persistence, and we will link it with our local storage. So in our app memory, so we'll use constant auth state key, okay? And here we'll say from auth dot. So we'll use our auth feature key, okay? So you remember the auth feature key is basically this, okay? So now this will make sure that it persists our auth state, which is only we need to care about, okay, for now. And now we will have our function, which will make sure the whole handling of this local storage, okay. So this is the function, you can see, it is auth local storage reducer function, and it takes the action reducer, and here it returns our local storage sink. So we just need to import it. So we just need to import this, okay. So here we've got local storage sink, and this auth state key to sink is the one, this one, okay. So just a typo. Okay, so now we also need to import these bits too. So we'll just import it. Okay, and the errors are gone. So you can see we have linked our keys, which is this auth state to key, rehided true, which will make sure that our data is still there. We are using our local storage, window.localstorage. Okay, and we have put our reducer here. Great. So now we will declare our meta reducers here. So meta reducers will basically have all the reducers we want to persist. So in our case, we only want to persist one reducer, which is our this one. So auth local storage sync reducer. Okay. Now we will take this meta reducer and register it. So inside the provide store, we will put our meta reducers and we will put it inside the object like this. Okay. Now we also need to put our router as well. So for that, we will define the property. We'll call it router. Okay. And we will give it equals to our router reducer. You can see like this. And also this one would be object as well like this. And we'll differentiate it like this. Great. So you can see the error is gone and we have got so our router of type router reducer. So this is for our router store and we've got meta reducer in order to keep our auth local storage in sync. Okay. Okay, now we also need to import our HTTP client module. So in order to use that, we are going to import it here. Okay, and we'll provide it here after this provide router. So we're going to provide HTTP client module as well like this. Okay, so now we need to provide, as we have done our store here, we need to provide our state as well. So we need to provide two state, as you remember, one for our auth and for our to do. So we will have our provide state here. Okay, like this. And inside this, first we will handle our auth. So we'll say from auth dot our auth feature key. You remember, right? This auth feature key, which is our this, and then we will mention our reducer here. So we'll say from auth dot our auth reducer. So you see the whole state, basically this. Okay. Now similar thing we will do for our to-do list as well. So here I'll say this should be from to do. So from to do, and this would be our to do feature key, right? This one, and our this would be from to do's dot our to do's reducer. Okay, so that's it. Okay, so now after this coming our provide effects. So we need to provide all of our effects here as well. So we have two effects for our to do's and for our auth. So as we have two, we'll be using the array and we'll providing them inside this. So we'll say auth effects and our to do effects. So like this. So now we have provided literally all of the things required to run our application. So at this point, our application should be up and running. So I'll be saving this. Make sure that your server is running and we will run our application. So we can see that our application is up and running. Great. So now I have saved my application, and if we go to our localhost 4200 register, you can see now we can register our user. So I'll register a user Geo. I'll set the email geo@gmail.com and we'll set the password. So now when we register, you can see it says registration was successful, please log in. Now we've got a login page and we need to log in. Okay, so you see it redirected us to our login. Now we'll use the same email and we will log in. So now you can see we are redirected to our to-do list, which is empty currently, but you can see it says here welcome Geo and our to-do list, and you can see that it doesn't allow us to submit the form for now. We can go and add over our items. So I can say food here, add the item, and you can see we have got options to edit, delete, and complete our item. Likewise, we can add more items like football, we can go and add meetings and so on, whatever we want to add, right? Like this. And we can go and we can, for example, you want to go and edit this meeting. So you can click here and you can click on edit. And you see you got save and cancel, so you can change it to meetings 1212 and save it. Now at this point, if you want to refresh our page, you see that the data is still there. You can go, you can close this browser. Okay, you can open again our port. You can see that we still got all the data as it was. It is because of our local storage. Okay, now we can go and we can change the data, we can delete the data if you want. So it asks for our permission and we delete it. So we can even get the data. Great. So now if I go and if I log out, you will see that we are back to our register page. So if I register now as a new user, so I'll say new here and it would be new@gmail.com. We will set our password. So this time when we register, you will see, and when we log in again, so as soon as we log in, you will see that we won't have any data because this user has its own set of to-do list. So when we save it, okay, and then when we log out, now if I log in back again as the previous user, then you will see we have our data back again. So that is the magic of our NgRx store management. We have got everything all in place. So if you guys like the video, then please like and subscribe. I will see you guys in the next video.